I'm going to go over the top 6 reasons why you might feel anxious going into games. Reason number 1 is wanting to play well. Wanting to play well means that you're putting pressure on yourself and you are stressing about how well you want to play the game. Now, of course, when you go into a performance, you go into a competition, the goal is to do your best. We know that. And that goal is never going to change, and I would never suggest that you change your goal from wanting to do your best to not wanting to do your best. But what we can easily see happen is when you have the goal going into a game of wanting to play well, this goal can lead to one of two things. Either you want to play well, and that feeling drives motivation, excitement, and so you play harder because you want to play well. Now, that's a great way of responding to this idea and this goal of wanting to play well. However, if you are feeling anxious, the other option can happen, which is you go into the game stressing about not playing well. And because you want to play well, you put pressure on yourself and you try to force a good performance. When you try to force a good performance, and when you also stress about not playing well, this is where you find yourself becoming anxious. Because sports performance anxiety is defined by extreme worries about what may or may not happen. And so if you're going into the game and all you can think about is, I want to play well, I need to play well today, I need to really do my best today, those thoughts of I need to, I want to can increase feelings of anxiety. So let's say that you're about to start a game. And as you start that game, your mind becomes filled with thoughts of, I really want to play well today. I want to do my best today. In that moment, are you thinking about how you play your best? Or is it easy to get stuck thinking, I want to play my best? When you get stuck thinking, I want to play my best and I want to play well, that's where you will see this anxiety increase because you're thinking, I want to play well, I want to play well. However, if you start to think, how do I play well? That's how you can use this to your advantage and you actually find the goal of wanting to play well help you play your best. So let's say that there is a baseball player and this baseball player is about to start a game and he's starting that game thinking, I really want to play well today, I want to do my best today. For whatever reason, right, he just wants to play his best that day. Now, going into the game, going into the first inning, his mind is still thinking about how well he wants to play. Do you think that as the game begins and as the innings progress and as he has his first at bat, do you think that he will feel more in the moment and more confident and more present? Or will he start to stress about how the game is going because he knows that his overarching idea and his overarching goal is, I want to play well? More than likely, if his mind is stuck on how well he wants to play during that game, he's going to start thinking about how the game is going and specifically how he is playing. So let's say his first at bat doesn't go that well. You know, it's not a terrible at bat. He doesn't strike out, but he grounds out to the second baseman. There was a runner on second, so he really felt like, okay, this is my opportunity to do something. He grounds out to that second baseman. Instead of moving on quickly, he continues to hold on to that ground out because he's thinking, I wanted to do well today, and I want to do well today. I've got to make up for it next time. So now he's added another layer of pressure to himself for that next at bat. So the next at bat, he goes up there thinking, okay, now I really have to do well because I didn't do well last at bat, so now I have to make up for it this at bat. And once again, he has too much tension on himself, too much pressure, and he doesn't have a good at bat. This is going to continue throughout the game unless he's able to say, hey, I'm not going to worry about the outcome of playing well. I'm going to focus on how I play well, and I'm going to be more present. So the first reason that you might be experiencing anxiety going into a game is because you're trying too hard to play well. This goal of wanting to play well leads to stress, and it leads to tension, and ultimately it keeps you from focusing on how you play well, and most importantly, it keeps you from playing the way that helps you play well. Reason number 2 is worrying too much about other people. Now, there can be so many people that you worry about when it comes to your performance. You might worry about your coaches. You might worry about your teammates. You might worry about your parents. You might just worry about the fans, right? But when you worry too much about other people, this can increase anxiety. Because why would you be worrying about other people in the first place when you play? Well, there's probably going to be a couple reasons why you might worry about them. Number 1 is playing time, right? You're worried about what coach thinks of you because you want to continue to play and you don't want to get benched. That can be a common reason that you worry about coach. Teammates might be that you're worried about not letting your teammates down because you don't want them to be mad at you if you make a mistake. Or maybe you are new to the team and so you want to impress your teammates and you want them to think that you are a good player. If it's your parents, you might be thinking, I don't want to let my parents down because they're going to yell at me in the car if I if I make a mistake today. Or you're going to think how much time and money and energy they've put into me. I don't want to play badly and have all that go to waste, right? So we see that there's so many people that you can worry about and so many different reasons why you might worry about those people. But when you worry about what other people think, you put stress on yourself and you grow anxious to perform. Because the one common factor or common characteristic between all of these reasons that I'm going over as to why you might be anxious is that each one of these reasons pulls you out of the present moment. It has you worrying about the future, it has you worrying about other people, whatever it might be, but you are not present. As you worry about coach, parents, teammates, or anybody else, your attention is not present. You are not focused on what's happening right now, and you are not allowing yourself to let go and relax into the present moment. There's always that overarching stress throughout the game. So let's say that you're going into a game and you are a swimmer, right? So you're going into a meet as a swimmer, and you're thinking about how much you want to impress your parents with your time. Maybe this is the first time they've seen you swim in a while, and you really want to impress them. As you're getting ready to start the race, do you feel like your focus will be on your pre-race routine, getting yourself relaxed, calm, and focused? Or will you think about how much you want to get that PB to impress your parents? If you think so much about how much you want to get that PB to impress your parents, while you want to get that PB, you aren't actually allowing yourself to do it because you are not focused on your pre-race routine, right? Then let's say that you are in the middle of the race and you're falling behind. You don't feel like you're going as fast. If you already have the idea in mind of, I want to impress my parents, and so you're worried about them, it's going to be really easy at that point to get frustrated and have a lot of negative self-talk take over because you don't feel like you're going to impress your parents, because that thought of impressing them is in the back of your mind. You know, anytime you are experiencing this worry about other people, it takes your attention off of yourself, it takes your attention away from the present moment, and once again, it takes your attention away from what it is that you need to do in order to play your best. And if it's teammates, if it's coaches, or if it's anybody else, it's going to be the same theme. When you worry about other people, you grow more anxious to play well, which once again feeds back into the last reason that we talked about, where when you want to play well, you play too much with stress, tension, and anxiety. Reason number 3 is focusing on your stats too much. Now, stats are so important to sports. I mean, that's what everybody focuses on. That's what determines whether or not you get an award, right? Whether you can go to another level is how are your stats? So stats are very real, and they're not anything that we can brush over, and they're nothing that we can push aside, but they are something that we need to be careful of thinking too much about. If you're performing and you're constantly thinking about how are my stats doing right now, then in your head you have this graph taking place where your stats are going up, your stats are going down, your stats are going up, your stats are going down. And this can be very tiresome and absolutely drain your energy when you are performing. Because when you focus on stats, you're focusing on the result. You're focusing on what's happening because of how I've performed, right? What are those numbers going to be? Is my batting average going up and down? When you find yourself spending too much time thinking about those stats, once again, you are taking yourself out of the present moment. But you're also focusing on something that's not 100% within your control. Because let's say that you are a softball player, right? And you've just had a really nice at-bat, right? It was a 3-2 count. You pieced the ball up. Unfortunately, you hit a line drive right to the left fielder, right? It was a great barrel for you. You felt good about the at-bat, but you lined out. Your batting average is going to go down a little bit. Now, if you're solely caught up in your batting average, will you feel good about that at-bat, or will you feel bad about that at-bat? If you're solely concerned with your batting average and the result of the at-bat, whether or not I got a hit or I did not get a hit, you're going to feel frustrated after that at-bat. Now, if you feel frustrated after that at-bat, going into your next at-bat, you'll experience more stress because now you think, I have to make up for it this next at-bat. Let's say that you are a basketball player and you have 5 points at halftime. If you have 5 points at halftime and you're solely concerned about your stats, do you think you're going to go into that next half with confidence, or will you go into that next half stressing and pressing to score more points? Now, in all honesty, this stressing and pressing could help you because maybe you give more effort and you're more aggressive, and so you do end up getting more points. But most often, especially if you already experience anxiety when you play, this will only lead to you trying too hard, right? To where you're trying to force shots, your shots are too stiff, they're tense, you're not fluid, you're not in the rhythm of the game because you're focused on how many points you have instead of just playing the game, right? Being in the flow of the game. So we have to be very careful not to get too caught up in stats. Now, if we know that stats are real, right? We know that you need to get a certain stat in order to keep playing, right? Because coach isn't going to put you out there and play you if your stats continue to drop. If we know that stats are important, how do we play without worrying about the stats? Well, the way you play without worrying about the stats is seeing them as what they are, a result, an outcome, something that you can't control, so you don't need to focus on. You need to allow other people to think about the stats, and you need to think about how you achieve those stats. And how you achieve those stats is how you play well in this present moment. If you can always keep your attention focused in the present moment, focused on what you need to do right now in order to play your best, statistics are going to take care of themselves. But you don't want to allow your mind to get caught up in what are my stats, how are my stats doing, because that's where you see anxiety increase when you play. And unfortunately, when you worry about what your stats will be and you press and you play with tension, your stats end up being worse than you wanted them to be in the first place, and it all stems from this stress that you're placing on them to have perfect statistics. Now, the next reason is comparison. So when you compare yourself, whether you are comparing yourself to teammates or you are comparing yourself to, other people on other teams, this will cause your anxiety to increase. Now, I was talking with an athlete yesterday about comparison, and he and I were going over this idea. Now, what he was telling me is that when he finds himself comparing himself to another player, it's typically because that other player is doing better during that game. Now, what do you think happens when he is comparing himself to another player who's doing something better than he is? Well, most of the time he ends up experiencing doubt because he starts to think, why can't I do that? Why am I not playing that well? How can I do that? And then he starts to stress, right? And so then he feels anxious because he feels like he's not playing as well as he needs to play. And so then he starts to press. If you've ever experienced this sort of comparison, you know what I mean, because there is this sense of, why am I not as good as that person? And then when I feel like I'm not as good as that person, I put pressure on myself to be as good as that person, so now I'm pressing. And then I don't play as freely as I need to, when in reality, comparison's always going to be there in sports, and you're going to find yourself wanting to be as good as other people, but when you compare and you stress as a result of that compare, and you allow that comparison to tear down your confidence, you're going to see nothing happen but anxiety and fear increase. So let's imagine that you are playing a game, and just like that other athlete I mentioned, somebody on your team starts to do really well. They're just having a phenomenal game. What's going to happen as you start to compare yourself to them? What kind of thoughts will you have in your mind? Remember, at the core of performance anxiety will be your thinking. It's your thinking about the future. It's your thinking about other people. It's your thinking about anything that takes you out of the present moment. That's going to increase your anxiety. So as you think about this other player on your team who's doing really well, what's going to happen to your stress levels? Are you going to feel calm and composed, or will you start to press and think, I need to play as well as they are? And you almost try to force yourself to play as well as they are. And we can even say that it's not a teammate. Let's say it's somebody on the other team. So now you're going head to head and you're trying to you're comparing yourself to the other person. So you're trying to do as well as they're doing. Maybe you're a golfer and you're going head to head with somebody on the golf course, and you're pressing and you're pressing and you're pressing because you want to do as well as somebody else is doing. Well, once again, that's only going to increase your anxiety. Now, the truth is, comparisons are necessary because sports are competitive. You want to beat somebody else. You want to be better than somebody else. But you're not going to be better than somebody else by constantly comparing yourself to them while you're competing. The only way to be better than other people when you're out there competing is by doing what you need to do to the best of your abilities, which requires you to focus purely on yourself. The more you compare, the less attention you're giving to yourself. So while you compare, you're increasing anxiety, but you're also decreasing the intent and the energy you're giving to the things that will help you play your best. Now, another reason that you might be experiencing anxiety when you play is bad practices. Now, if you have bad practices all week, this will make you feel more stressed going into a performance because you don't have the same level of confidence stemming from good practices. So at this point, you're finding yourself maybe worried about how's the game going to go because I haven't been practicing very well recently, so I don't feel like I'm going to be able to play well in this upcoming game. And so then you feel that stress, right? You feel that pressure to play well, which we know is going to increase anxiety. So let's say that you are a football player and practices recently have not been going very well. You're a running back and you've been just not having good practices. Your cuts have felt slow. You've been fumbling the ball in practice. What will happen as Wednesday turns into Thursday, and Thursday turns into Friday, and Friday turns into Saturday, and Saturday's game day? With each passing day, as your practices don't go very well, your anxiety is going to increase because you're starting to think, will I carry what's happened in practice into games? And then your mind starts to create the scenario of what's going to happen in the game. And then you start to imagine fumbling the ball during the game. And you start to imagine how mad coach is going to be, how much you're going to be disappointed in yourself, how the whole crowd is going to see you play poorly during that game on Saturday. And all of this is stemming from the fact that you have not had good practices recently. And the more you worry, the less confidence you're going to have in yourself. So now as the game begins, this is going to kind of bring us back to that first reason that I said, which is you're wanting to play well. You're wanting to make up for those bad practices, and then you start to press. And now you're stressing once again about, will I play well? Will I not play well? Simply because you've had bad practices. Now, the truth is, if you've had bad practices, maybe something's off within your game. But just because you've had bad practices does not mean that you have to have a bad game, because you've likely had good games recently or even good practices recently besides the bad practices that you've had in the days leading up to the game. But when it comes to bad practices versus good practices and you're trying to build confidence for an upcoming game, it's all about your point of reference. Are you thinking about your most recent 2 practices where you haven't performed up to your capabilities, or are you thinking about the last 7 practices before that where you did really well? When it comes to bad practices leading to anxiety, this happens because your last practice or maybe the past few practices have not gone the way you want them to go, so then your confidence will decrease. As your confidence decreases, there's this stress and this worry about, will I be able to play well in my upcoming game? And then you start to press and you start to grow anxious about what will happen during that performance. So we have to really look out for any bad practices that are feeding into this feeling of anxiety going into a game. And then the 6th reason is actually not being prepared. Now, this is going to be not being prepared physically, and it can also be not being prepared mentally. The reason that not being prepared will make you feel anxious is that preparation equals confidence. When you are prepared, you feel more confident in yourself and you trust in yourself more. When you're not prepared, it's easy to worry about how you'll do because you don't have that trust. Now, I want you to imagine an athlete who is very anxious already about their performance. They grow anxious in the days and the weeks leading up to a big game. And unfortunately, because of this anxiety, they don't prepare as much as they need to. Now, I know that sounds strange, because if you know that lack of preparation can make you feel anxious, you would want to prepare even more. But the truth is, anxiety, when it happens, it can also lead to avoidance. So we have this avoidance behavior that stems from feeling anxious. And so when you are trying to avoid an anxious situation, you also try to avoid any thoughts about the anxious situation. So in the moment, if you have a game a week from now and you're feeling anxious, in the moment, it's going to feel safe to not think about the game at all. It feels very scary for you to think about the game because that only increases your feelings of anxiety. But in order to prepare for competition, especially to mentally prepare for competition, it requires you to think about the game. Whether this is going through your game plan and researching your opponent, whether it's visualizing yourself performing, or whether it's simply paying attention to your thoughts and trying to have positive thoughts about your performance. All of that can increase your focus and your thinking about the game, which if you're already anxious about that game can feel like you're only increasing your anxiety at that point. But the truth is, you're working through the anxiety because you're increasing your confidence by becoming prepared. But when you feel this anxiety, and in the moment, anxiety is such an intense feeling. In the moment when you feel that anxiety, you just want to get rid of it. And the way that you can just simply get rid of it is by avoiding. And what you're avoiding at that point, since a game is a week away or even weeks away, the only thing you're avoiding at that point is thinking about the game, which means you're not going to be taking steps that you need to take in order to be prepared. This is mainly going to be mental preparation, but you also might find yourself not prepared as much physically. Because something else that can happen with this avoidance behavior with anxiety is shutting down, to where you might not go to workouts, you might not go run as much as you need to, so you're not going to be as physically conditioned for the performance. Maybe you're not doing extra work on your own to fine-tune some skills that you've been struggling with. Maybe during practices recently, you haven't been practicing all that well, but you know that if you could put in a little extra work, you would make up for that. But because of your anxiety, you don't want to put in that extra work. So you avoid, because once again, just thinking about your game, thinking about your performance does nothing but make you feel anxious. So the safe thing to do in the moment is to avoid. But the more you avoid practicing physically, the more you avoid mental preparation, the more anxious you'll be when it comes to the game. And so unfortunately, if you are already experiencing anxiety, and you know this, you have to be as prepared as possible for the performance. If you can be prepared physically, so you know that you absolutely trust in your skills, you've put in the work, and if you can be prepared mentally, so you've put in the work to increase your confidence, you've been paying attention to your thinking, you've been doing some mindfulness meditation to work on calming your mind, you've been performing visualization, you've planned for your opponent, right? You've researched them, you know what your game plan is going to be. That significantly increases confidence and reduces anxiety. When all of that is absent and you do not prepare as much as you need to, you're going to see your anxiety increase when it comes to game time. Now, with these 6 reasons, we see that there are many drivers for sports performance anxiety. But once again, as I said earlier, at the core of all of these is your mind being taken away from the present moment and you thinking about how the game will go. Will I play well? Will I play like I've been playing in practice? What will other people think of me? We just see all of your attention being taken away from the present moment. So we know that the solution, right? The solution to reduce this anxiety is to be more present, focus on what you can control, and keep your mind focused on how you play well instead of will you play well. Now, to help you with managing your performance anxiety, I have made another video that goes into detail on some exercises you can use to reduce nerves and to reduce anxiety going into a game. And so you can click right here to go ahead and watch that video. And if you're listening as a podcast, I've linked the video in the description below. So in summary, sports performance anxiety is driven by wanting to play well. So you want to play too well, so you press, worrying about what other people think of you, thinking about your stats, comparing yourself to others, having bad practices, and then not being prepared both physically and mentally for the competition. If you have any questions about sports performance anxiety or any other sports psychology topic, please let me know in the comments below. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training.